freedom just begun, living large under the sun.
Hey, welcome to the Consulting Edge, sponsored by Smart MAI. I'm your host, Dan Mulberry. On today's episode, we're going to be speaking, as always, with an experienced consultant. We focus on consultants, advisors, and business leaders, and we talk about how they solve difficult problems, especially in today's age of technology and AI, and how consultants work to guide their clients through these difficult times. Today's subject is going to be around the fact that companies have access to an array of technology, an extraordinary collection, given our point in history. They can purchase CRM systems, automated marketing platforms, analytics tools, AI, virtual agents, custom applications. But the purchasing is the easy part. The harder question is, what process should the technology support? How should marketing and sales work together? And what should be automated? Where does the business still need a human relationship, which I think is key? Our guest today works directly at the intersection of all of those questions. So I'm pleased to welcome Candice DeRiso, the founder and lead strategist of Beckmann Collaborative. They're a consulting firm that helps organizations connect marketing strategy, sales processes, operational systems, and technology. Candice has a wonderful, interesting background. She started out, she has 20 years of marketing and business development expertise, and she's spent a lot of time working with Broadway productions and concerts at Carnegie Hall. So, Candice, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It does sound weird hearing those things out loud with this tech gal who used to do music stuff.
It's all math, right?
Fibonacci.
Exactly. Well, let's jump right into it. So, given that interesting background, how did that path eventually lead you into marketing? That you were a music major in school, you got into marketing after you got out, but stayed in the entertainment industry. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, I actually studied a very unusual topic in college, which was music business. It was very new at the time. I assumed going into college I would need a double major, but it happened to be that just a couple years before I went off to college, they started introducing this new major that kind of combined music with business classes. So it was like I had a double major. I was in a 5-year program. I did it in 4, but
nice.
So I had, voice lessons, and then I would go to economics class, So it was definitely an interesting combination of things, but my plan, funny enough, was to be like an agent to musicians, because I knew that even though I love music and I love performing, I didn't want that life. Just the life of a performer is a really difficult one. It drains you. I mean, if you've ever been a performer, you know that. But I loved the idea of being like part of the powerhouse that would drive that performer to do great. So I thought I would pursue that, and life just threw me a curveball. I worked at some really cool venues, including the B.B. King Blues Club back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was a really cool job for a little while. But when I got out of college, funny enough, the people at B.B. King's tried to convince me to drop out of college and to start working for them.
Oh, really?
No, I didn't pay all this money. No, to not actually just finish my degree. But when I got out of college, trying to find a job was not hard, but it was hard to find that combination of music and business where I could continue developing that skill set. I ended up working at a fine art museum, and in that job, they had 2 part-timers who had quit. So I took on 2 part-time roles, and I made it into a full-time role. So half the time I was in finance, the other half the time I was like customer service / marketing, like up front at the front desk. So it was a very, it was just such a classic fresh out of college kind of job, where you just in it, right? And you just have to figure it out. And I was at the front desk, and the guy, the guard would often check people in, right? Because it's a nonprofit museum, but they still have to say, $3 or whatever the minimal entry fee is. And they usually ask you basic information like, oh, how did you hear about us? And, oh, what zip code are you from? Just to get some basic demographics. Well, geeky me fell in love with that part. Market research was I had studied marketing in college a little bit, but the in real life experience was the best education. Wow. I got really into market research in that job because I started basically I don't want to say interviewing, but asking people more questions. And then I figured out how to change the fields in their software so that I could collect more information.
Oh, wow.
The director of marketing was a little shocked when I kind of just hijacked her system, but she was also very happy because she was only asking, well, how did you hear about us? In a really simple way, like, was it the radio or a friend? I went further to say, well, which radio station? Oh, well, which friend or which conference or whatever it was. I added another field. And then one day, I think it was probably 3 or 4 months into working there, I went to the marketing manager. I pulled a report and said, hey, guess what? I found out that the radio station that you're running the most ads on is actually not your best one. This other radio station is bringing in more leads, larger families, more frequently.
Oh, what valuable information.
But like nobody had taught me market research. I was just a geek, right? I just jumped in. So that was kind of my introduction to marketing. And from there, I got further education with my gig working on Broadway, promoting Broadway shows. That's when I learned guerrilla marketing, which is some of the hardest stuff you will ever have to do. If you ever meet somebody who has only done digital marketing, I don't want to say don't trust them, but question them, because there's a magic in real life kind of marketing, if that makes sense. That guerrilla marketing knocked me off my feet and taught me a lot. I did not get into digital marketing for a few more years at least, not until I was at Carnegie Hall. And even then, there was still a lot of traditional marketing that we were doing. I was trying to convince them to do SMS.
Let me ask you this. So you worked at Carnegie Hall, you worked with some Broadway productions. What did that environment teach you about attracting an audience, managing campaigns, and producing results under pressure, besides the fact that you can tap into data to make more intelligent decisions, which you've obviously demonstrated already?
Yeah, I learned that one really quickly, right? Using data to inform my decisions. So I actually took that knowledge and applied it to those other jobs. So when I was on Broadway, they interviewed me. They said, how would you attract somebody to go see Les Miserables? And I said, well, what if we gave away a free ticket and we just hid it under a plate at a French restaurant, right? Because it's a French music, like, right? French bass, French Revolution. And then people, all they do is they just naturally start talking about it. Oh my gosh, I want a free ticket. What I learned about was the original version of virality and how to create virality to get people talking. Marketing is 100% about relationships. That is what I learned very early on. The relationships I made at Carnegie Hall, what I actually did was I would go to random theaters and musical organizations and schools and just make friends. And I would tell them about the cool things that we were doing at Carnegie Hall. Carnegie never had a partnership. They had sponsorships, but they didn't have like partnerships with organizations until I showed up. I made up a role. I just said, you say you're friends with the people at Harlem Theater, but you haven't actually shown up there. I'm showing up there every month and telling them how important they are and how I want them to come see us. So I developed relationships, and that blew up. They weren't selling student tickets very well. That was the pain point I was trying to solve. They didn't know how to reach young people. Young people didn't hang out at Carnegie Hall. They associated it with classical music and being outdated. Carnegie Hall doesn't just do classical music. I mean, they do some really cool, amazing performances from people of all ages and all types of music.
Oh, I bet.
Like Beyonce has been there, right? So it was interesting to me to say, how would I get a college student to show up? And I then also started like a whole university program and made university students be like our volunteers to go out in the community for me. So my long-winded answer to your question is relationship management was my biggest lesson, and using data to inform what relationships were worth building.
Well, after you practiced and practiced and practiced and made it to Carnegie Hall, you moved to Texas and got deeper into the technology side of the business. Tell us a little about that.
Well, I interviewed at some performing arts institutions here in the Austin, Texas area. And after being at Carnegie Hall, they were kind of a letdown. I know that sounds terrible, but I had these expectations and they kind of showed up here. And I thought, well, I was trying to introduce some of this tech to Carnegie. Maybe I should try something different. So I ended up working in SMS, like text message marketing. And I got really good at it really fast. I was supposed to be an account manager but I very naturally became like a sales manager. It wasn't my title, but I was developing partnerships with our large clients. So like an ad agency, right? The ad agency is kind of like B to B to C, or B to B to B, right? We had the technology for the ad agency who was then reselling it to their clients. And so I would help them come up with these marketing campaigns. I was just this master brainstormer. I never tried to sell. I just tried to answer questions and come up with cool ideas. And in doing that, there was a month where I sold more than the entire sales team just by being a person, right? It says something about sales is like, if you're trying too hard, you're probably going to fail at it.
So let's shift a little to what you're doing now. So you've got your own marketing agency, and you obviously recognize that many agencies operate without a consistent process. So I believe one of the first things you did was you built that process out. You want to talk about that journey?
Sure. So I learned basically through all these work experiences. For one thing, I should explain that when I was very young, I just assumed everyone wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just assumed that. I don't know where I got that, probably from my parents, but I just thought you only get jobs at other people's companies until you are ready to start your own.
That's a great attitude.
It was the weirdest thing. And I was very surprised when I had these friends who just stayed at the same company. I was like, wait, aren't you going to like start something? They're like, no. What? So that being said, when I took the job at that text messaging company or SMS company, I had actually told them at the interview, one day I'm going to quit, but it's not going to be for a competitor. It's going to be to start my own business. So one day I just said, it's time. I'm ready. And so I teamed up with a graphic designer who I was friends with, and she already had like a graphic design business. She didn't have a good content marketer who was good at selling. And I realized that I had learned enough about process that what differentiated me was not that I could write good words, but it was the process I followed that actually made me unique and made me highly productive, that I could crank out a whole bunch of content because I had a formula for each client. And I also had a formula for the process. So while she and I were doing that, I also found a strategic partnership with a virtual assistant company. And I said to her, you've got these VAs, but they're just throwing stuff out there. They don't have an approach, a process for creating social media posts, being the perfect example. I said, here's my process. I follow these steps. I use this template. I go with this formula, create a formula per client based on data, right? And take their data set, turn that into their scheduling system, and then go. And so she was able to then kind of resell me as the strategist while her VAs were the implementers. And it was just this beautiful partnership for a long time. And we're still very good friends to this day. I loved that.
Sounds like you were ahead of your time. You were trying to accomplish the same thing that people are trying to accomplish with AI today. So that's impressive.
Thanks.
What did that experience teach you about the difference between having a talented individual perform a task versus automating that task?
Oh, man. Well, it's so interesting. So I've learned, especially in the past few years, as AI in particular has grown, that, and actually, let me take a step back from that first. What I started to learn as my business grew was that my clients already had the content in them. They just didn't know how to express it in a clear sentence, right? Or a clear post or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And so I became an expert at that process of, well, how do I take this word vomit and make it into something good that somebody wants to engage with? And then I went a step further and I said, what if I just take their stuff and edit it? What if I'm not necessarily the creator, but I'm the editor? And then the next step after that became, oh, what if AI took their word vomit, put it into an outline? I get that outline approved, and then I use a human editor to actually turn it into content. So it's kind of this constant evolution with content marketing and sales even. And then automation came in with, oh, not only can I do that, I can then put that into, let's say, email cadence. Mm-hmm. And then when a lead comes into my CRM, boom, because their lead source is website, and because they said they're in the healthcare industry, put them in this case, and it's going to educate them and give them the information they need about my business. So very selfishly, I went looking for a CRM. I found Zoho. I fell in love with it because I'm a tech geek apparently. And when I realized I could automate those processes, it just I was a solopreneur, right? I was me and maybe one or two contractors and all those VAs I worked with. I needed a way to scale myself. So marketing and sales automation allowed me to get to that place. And now
That's
I'm
awesome.
obsessed.
That's very cool. So you've also evolved from a marketing agency into a revenue operations consultant. You want to talk about that transition and what that means? What does revenue operations mean to the layman?
I feel like that's just the world trying to put a fancy title on sales. So anything that makes revenue. So nowadays you won't hear about a director of sales. You'll hear about a CRO, the Chief
Right.
Revenue Officer.
Right.
I try not to put myself into those chief positions, but instead to support the people in those positions. So a chief revenue officer or a CMO might come to me, or maybe both of them actually, that frequently happens. Hey, we need a better way to get marketing qualified leads and a process to hand those off to our SDRs, sales development representatives, so that they can sell. And that's like what I found was content marketing's great. We still have a handful of clients that we do that for, but every one of those clients also needed these processes. It's like your marketing operations, your sales operations, because even if you're a medium-sized business, so some of our clients maybe have 25, 50 employees, they still need things to like move it along, especially for a sales team. You know, sales teams these days are expected to enter so much data into the CRM. What can I do to help that sales team reduce that data entry so they'll get what I call data fatigue or data entry fatigue? And that's where automations can help. You know, you have automated data enrichment. You can have automated email sequences, tasks, etc., just so that they can focus on doing what they are best at, sales, rather than getting lost in the weeds of the tech that the executives want you to track all your moves with.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're providing so much great content here. You're covering a lot of my questions, and you're also raising things that I didn't think to ask. So I've got my my script here, and you're shredding it for me, which is good. That's good.
I also just finished writing a blog post about sales evaluation. So a lot of this is really fresh. I'm like, oh yeah, you got to do this thing and that thing.
Well, I want to get to the Zoho ecosystem in a minute, but let's talk a little bit specifically about AI and how companies are adopting it. I mean, to me, AI is the latest super tool for automation. Automation's been around for a long time. I have made a career out of figuring out what needs to be automated and how to automate it. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing with AI out in the marketing and sales space with the clients you deal with. What's working and what are people trying that's a letdown and not living up to expectations?
Yeah, well, so the thing that is not working is when people try to lean on AI to think for them. A great example of what not to do is don't put your create project requirements for me into AI, right? If you can write the prompt, send that to your consultant. Don't put it in AI. If you can write a really good prompt for AI about what your problem is, then you're better off sending that to your consultant, because the consultant is probably going to do a better job than AI would of coming up with a real solution. That's actually been a problem I've seen over and over again. The other problem is assuming that AI can just run things for you, like replace an entire team member. We're just not there yet. At least not what I'm seeing. I actually hate the fact that people call them AI agents, because it makes it sound like you can replace a person.
Yeah, we're not quite there, but I don't anticipate it's going to be very long before we're very close to that. With the acceleration of change and improvement in the AI platforms, I recently read a book that was written in 24, and all of these futuristic things that they were talking about with AI that they thought were years and years out are already in place. So it's changing very rapidly, and smart people are out there taking advantage of it. How do you approach it with the client in terms of determining what, do you have a framework for determining what should be automated or figuring out, how do you assess the client before you get started on giving them any technology tips?
That's a great question. And it's definitely something we've had to think about. I have to admit, because I come from a marketing and sales background, I've had to train myself and learn the hard way in some cases how to approach automation and operational improvements, it's a very different mindset, right? Marketing is very creative. It's just like, come up with cool stuff and get approval. Whereas the work we're doing now, especially in the past 3 to 5 years, is much more structured. So that's why your question is so great, because you have to follow a structure in order for that to be successful. And when somebody says, hey, can you do this? The questions in my mind are, is this repeatable? How do I trigger it? How do I filter it? If it's repeatable, it should totally be an automation, right?
Absolutely.
If it's not something that's repeatable in a very simple way, it might not be a good automation, right? If I can find a clear trigger, so like what starts it, it probably could be an automation, right? So I kind of go in that order: repeatable, trigger, and then criteria. And how easy are those things? And it's okay if it's complex, but that repeatable one's really important.
Do you find that your clients, when you walk in, already have ideas of what they want to automate, or are you helping them with that discovery from day one?
That is down the middle, 50-50. I find some people show up with their laundry list of amazing things they want to magically happen. And then the other half are just, I just know we're a mess. What do we do? I've seen both sides of the spectrum. And just to give you an example, I have a client and I love them. They're in manufacturing and they are still doing inventory in an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, wow.
And their sales orders is in Zoho CRM, which is fine. But now they realize, oh, wait, we've got this powerful tool set. Hey, Candice, maybe we could improve our inventory management. That's when I ask these questions like, wait, what? You do it in an Excel spreadsheet? You tally things by hand and then update the spreadsheet? What? Sometimes it, like for them, it was just, oh, maybe we could do something about this, right? Candice has done all these cool automations for us to tighten things up for quotes and sales orders. Oh, that kind of impacts inventory. Oh, well, maybe we should make that process tighter.
Exactly. Well, you made an interesting comment earlier about how much data salespeople are being asked to put into the CRM. And what I've seen is it's one thing when you're working with a client and their people realize and know that you can make their life easier by automating something like the inventory management system. It's another thing when you're adding to their burden already, which in my experience, users of CRM seem to feel that way, whether it's true or not, no matter how much benefit they get from it. If you add a couple extra steps that they didn't have before, you can take away 10. But if they've got to put 2 new things in the system, that can be a point of contention. How do you manage adoption with the CRMs? And what are you seeing out there with Zoho that eases that adoption?
I don't think software eases adoption. I mean, there is. I mean, it could. But I think in order to get good software adoption of any software, it's just going to sound funny, but the executive team has to get out of their bubble. That's like the first most important thing. If it's just the executive team designing how the software should work, then it's going to fail. If they do not include the actual users in the conversation, it's going to be a problem. So I always recommend user interviews. Funny enough, we have a client who we've been working with them for almost 2 years. And we've never done user interviews for them because they kind of hired us after their CRM was already set up and we've just, further customized. And I've only done one of the user interviews so far. And that one user interview was so enlightening for me to learn about the specific pain points. Like, wow, the team never brought this up before. And it's a real estate firm. So they have like 30 agents. Now, I won't be interviewing all 30, but I'm going to be interviewing like 5 or 6 power users, so to speak. And it's already interesting. So it speaks very much to include people in the conversation who are actually using the software. Because like you said, if I take away 10 steps but add 2 new ones, are those 2 new ones going to drive you crazy because you have to figure it out, or are they easy? Right? Did I make it a pick list, or did I make it type a long sentence? Big difference, right? So that is first and foremost is leadership actually collaborating with the users, and also leadership has to actually know how the software works too. Right. I'm not saying they have to be power users, but they should at least know what the map of like the customer journey is and how that shows up in your software. Because if they cannot be a resource, then the sales team feels like, oh, it's up to us to figure this out. And then data gets incorrectly input, or just they blatantly ignore the rules, they find workarounds, and then you're not getting out of it what you want. So that's by far the highest priority. I would say the second is, if you can do it, a map. I like diagrams, visual diagrams of like, what is the customer journey and the salesperson's journey of using this, because that allows you to kind of poke holes and say, oh, that's repeatable. Let's automate that.
Right.
That's how you can improve the process. I think those are the big ones that I often look for.
That's interesting. It's not quite apples to apples, but I've done quite a few very large enterprise implementations, and I've actually gone so far as to formulate teams of users in the selection process and have them be heavy participants in actually selecting the software. So they participate in the reviews. Building something out or automating existing processes is very different than an enterprise application. But talk to me a little about what you're doing with the Zoho ecosystem.
Well, as I mentioned before, I kind of fell into the Zoho stuff accidentally. I started using it for myself, just the CRM. And the year after I started using Zoho CRM, they launched Zoho One, which is kind of like the big package where you get all 50 apps, although then I think it was 40. So you pay one price and you get all these different apps. So I knew, like, I had done the math. I'm like, well, I want to use these 3 or 4 apps. When I do the math, I'm better off just getting this Zoho One, even if I only use those 4 or 5 apps. So I started out like a super user, as I mentioned, and then I kind of bragged to my clients. I was like, you'll never believe what I automated. And it just became like an accidental growth. And I kind of fell into becoming a Zoho partner, which basically means that I get certified in the different apps. So I learn the apps so well that they test me and I'm officially certified. And then I know how to implement it properly for other people. So our business is now like a combination of consulting from a business standpoint and proper, I'll call it solution architecture, using specifically Zoho and of course other third-party apps that connect. And I love it. I'm so happy that I happened to fall into Zoho because they have certain values at their company that I really respect, like privacy first. That is one of their highest values.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies whose names I will not say who are selling your data. Salesforce. And they're using your customer data to sell to competitors so they can get customers. And that's just, I'm not okay with that. I like privacy.
That's a widespread thing. I was reading the other day, and I was aware of this, but our smart TVs sell, the manufacturers of the TVs collect all the data of everything you do on that TV, and they sell that. And I guess I knew that, but when I read about how they're doing it and the depth of the data they're selling on you and what's being done with it, it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary.
It is.
Well, we're running out of time here. I certainly didn't cover everything I would have liked to cover, and you covered quite a few of my question segments by just being thorough in your answers, which I appreciate a great deal. But one other quick question, and then I'll ask a final question. So your husband now serves as your solutions engineer and developer. And I know you guys have built some really amazing complex systems with the Beckmann Collaborative. How does the strategy and the technical side of your business work together? And I would ask if it affects your marriage, but I'm not going to ask you that.
Well, it's not always easy because like I'm the people person and he's the solution person, right? So already in any relationship, we're coming at it from two different sides, right? He's thinking, how do I make this structurally correct so it will work in forever? And I'm thinking, how do I satisfy the client with their requirements?
So you're complementing each other with your skill sets. That's what I'm saying.
It is. And sometimes we butt heads about it, but we always come to a really good solution because of that, because we're married, because we know the importance of compromise, because we know the importance of aligning, well, the client wants it this way. can we match that? Or is that an unrealistic expectation? And so I'm that liaison between crazy, as we might say, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals, and realistic goals, right? So we've had the opportunity to build some really cool, complex systems I never really even imagined were possible. And I guess I didn't even think to ask until he joined me. So it's exciting because there are things I used to have to outsource, and now I just knock on the wall and say, "Hey, can we talk about this?"
Nice.
And within minutes of a client call, we've already outlined a potential solution. It's fantastic to move that quickly.
Final question for you, Candice.
Please.
Imagine there's a business owner listening to us today. They have a CRM. They have several marketing tools. They have a collection of automations, maybe some AI subscriptions, but they still don't have a consistent sales process and can't clearly connect their marketing activity to their revenue. What's the first thing they should stop doing, and what's the first thing they should do instead?
They should stop using lots of different software platforms. Like, that's honestly, siloed systems is such a problem.
It is.
The best thing you can do is connect them. It is why I ended up with Zoho, right? Because they already had pre-integrated systems. But even for my clients who use, let's say, QuickBooks and not Zoho Books, still plays nice, right? So as long as you can connect it, integrate it, you can then see how this marketing qualified lead from your Facebook ad, let's say, came into your CRM, and then you maybe put it into an email cadence and qualified it. And then when it got to a certain stage, it got handed off to sales. And so they did their follow-up calls. And then you could see when it converted and became a deal. It's just connecting the system so that one talks to the other. And so you can see that Joe Schmo from the email marketing is also Joe Schmo in your CRM, that they are the same person. Connected data.
Yeah, and I've seen great success using AI to help patch some of those things together. You no longer have to go out and build dedicated APIs. They can leverage existing APIs. The AI can do quite a few things. So that's one place where I've seen a lot of utility for it. But Candice, thank you so much. Obviously, CRMs are becoming more complicated. There's more and more data to manage. I think a lot of companies really struggle. A lot of them don't even have CRMs, don't know what to do with it when they get it. So services like yours, whether it's someone just starting out or someone who has a complex sales process and operations system and is in-depth in marketing, your ability to go in and really kind of see through the maze of what they're doing is impressive. So
thank you.
If people want to learn more about you and the Beckmann Collective, how do they reach out to you?
Honestly, you can go straight to our website, BeckmannCollaborative.com. It's Beckmann with two N's.
Two N's.
But I don't know any other Beckmann Collaboratives. There's like a Beckmann Collective, I think, but I think it's an architecture firm or something. But if you look for Beckmann Collaborative and like Zoho, you'll definitely find us. Honestly, we've got a contact form. Soon we'll be releasing, pick a package and you get an instant quote coming soon.
Cool.
Get a free consult. I mean, honestly, most of the time, I've had several people come to me, they get their free consult, and I don't hear from them for a year or two because I gave them enough good info to just run with on their own. So sometimes you'll just get good free advice, even if you don't necessarily want to hire us.
That's great. That's great. Well, Candice, thank you very much. This has been the Consulting Edge podcast brought to you by Smart MAI. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.